Gonna add a title to this. Woo! It's been a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Been a minute because we had Thanksgiving and we had November. November is just not a really motivated time for me. I was out on the range, I was having fun with my buddies, but as far as drawing goes, just work was taking up the monopoly of my creativity. Now it's December, Christmas season. It's Tom Tom. I'm your host of the Tomcast for today, and we're going to do some drawing for you. Thanks to all my friends and relations, and thanks to Amber for giving me some awesome tunes today. Shout out to Amber and the band Actors. The song is Face Meets Glass, and you can look up that on YouTube or on Spotify. Face Meets Glass. Good stuff by the band Actors. Got me motivated today. Coffee by Dunkin' Donuts and drawings by Photoshop and Wacom Cintiq. We got the Wacom pen today. We got the two buttons on the side. We got the tip in the front. We got the eraser in the back, which we never use because hotkeys. Hotkeys are what's up. If you all are nice, we'll go into the Tom Reads the News segment by the end of the hour. But for right now, I'm going to talk about some drawing stuff. Amber, shout out to you here. Here's an illustration I did with Amber as the muse for an illustration last year with her sweet little doggo. So this is the kind of stuff I like to draw. I like to draw commandos. I like to draw people in body armor, suits, guns, gear, kit, spaceships, science fiction, all that kind of stuff. And this year, I got so pumped up about sci-fi again because I watched the movie Dune by Denis Villeneuve, or French words. Love that director. Did the film Sicario. He did Dune. Here's a sketch I did. I was trying to think of like what would Duncan Idaho, one of these bad mofo characters from the House Atreides in the Dune world, look like if it took place in the real world. Now, Dune has a lot of references and metaphors for the reality we find ourselves in. Frank Herbert was a genius. He said he set out to write science fiction for people who didn't love science fiction. And unfortunately, the story is so big and so all encompassing in the politics and the different factions and technology that it's really hard to consolidate that huge world into just a 2 hour film. That's why a lot of people think it's kind of confusing, either seeing the David Lynch version from the 80s or the modern version with Timothy Chalamet and Josh Brolin and all those other people. So I like the Duncan Idaho character. This was my initial sketch for it. It was okay. I'm not really feeling it. Usually when I'm drawing a character, it's better to base it off people I know. And since it's today, it's Drew's birthday, I believe, since Facebook told me that. We're going to do something fun with Drew today. We're going to make Drew a character in the universe of Dune. And I think that'll be kind of fun. That'll be kind of motivating. And happy birthday, Drew. So I'm going to take this photo of Drew I found on Facebook and incorporate it into an updated version of the drawing I want to do here. So I have the sandworm, I have some of the Fremen, I have some of the converts, I got the two moons, and I got the orthocopter thing, a phonocopter thing, whatever you want to call it. And we're going to incorporate Drew into the video today. Let's see how it goes. Let's see where we come up with. And hopefully I come up with something interesting to talk about. And I hope you guys have a good time. If you're watching and you're tuning in live, then please send me comments. Let me know you're seeing this. Let me know how it sounds. And feel free to post requests, questions, etc., 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 etc. And you can message me after this is live too, and I'll get back to you whenever I'm available. So we got Drew as a reference. We're going to put this up over on the other screen so I can focus on the drawing part. Comment if you've seen Dune. Let me know what you think of it. I feel like it's a great homage to the book. I don't think it really stands as a cinematic narrative very well by itself. I think the sequel will answer a lot of the questions. There's so many crucial things in the book in terms of these conversations and what people are thinking. It's really hard to do that in a movie. The David Lynch version has a lot of narration to it. So how do I build a face here? I'm going to be doing a portrait demo for my niece on Sunday. So this is also going to function as a warm-up for me for doing that demo. I do not just sketch for fun as much as I used to. Uh, big, big sphere for the head up close. It's going to be kind of mimicking. There's like a series of circles in this cartoon I'm drawing. We have the mouth of the worm. We have the moons. And then I think I want to have uh, our character here, which is going to be Gurney Halleck, or drew as Gurney Halleck, who is the master of arms for the House of Atreides, who teaches young Paul Atreides the ways of the sword, along with Duncan Idaho, but they kind of switch roles. I think Drew and his brothers would make a fabulous casting for the Dune universe. If there was ever a play held in Maryland, I think that would be pretty awesome because the House of Atreides, in the movie at least, has some Scottish Irish kind of background to it. There's some bagpipes being played. There's some cool music when they're marching onto the planet Arrakis, and it's all pretty dope. There's something universally terrifying about the bagpipes, universally loved and universally feared. And we just think it's cool. I think it's cool. Maybe it's because I grew up in British culture. I got British blood in my veins, and just naturally a little worried about those pipes, man. If the pipes were firing up, that meant trouble was coming. That means all was not well in the King's England or the Queen's England, depending on what era you were in. It's kind of fascinating to me how history of empire involves kings and subjects, and the subjects fighting off the kings and eventually becoming allies again. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about the British Empire and a few other empires is that we work together now. Like we once fought with England 300 years ago for the independence of the colony, and then now they're our closest ally. And all the English speakers, native English speakers of the world seem to come to the aid of each other more so than the non-English speaking ones. Earlier this year, we were talking about how France and Australia got into problems with a submarine deal. And if only the French would adopt English for their practical language, maybe the French would have gotten. No, French is beautiful. I'm kind of being a little facetious. We love France. We love the food. We love the cultural contributions in the arts and music and film and all of that. Because without French film and French art, American art wouldn't exist. I contend. I mean, they really broke the world. And if it wasn't for America, the French Revolution wouldn't have happened. My history teacher in high school often was quoted as saying, "The French Revolution was the main show, and the American Revolution was a dress rehearsal." Because of the French Revolution, they actually killed they actually exiled the king. They took away the king's power. The American Revolution was just saying, "Hey, king, we recognize you're still the king. We just don't think you should have jurisdiction over this colony that's 2,000 miles away. We think that the corporation that this colony was founded around is actually a better way to organize and do stuff." America was maybe the first nation established around corporations. I mean, the corporation, the stocks, bonds, all that kind of stuff predate the forming of America. The Constitution, like the idea that we have an agreement, we have a gentleman's agreement to organize around some ideas of how to behave. Now, founded on the British common law, America would not have the Constitution if it wasn't for British common law and the hundreds, if not thousands of years common law evolved from, let's say, maybe back to the Greeks, maybe back to the Romans. Everything we have comes from something else, from somewhere else, and it is adapted by the young in an abstract way to the times we live in. Don't you think? What do you think, Duncan Idaho drew? Oh, excuse me, Gurney Halleck drew here. It's looking more like Ian from Forgotten Weapons because I don't have the rest of the beard kind of drawn in here. So right now, the eyes are kind of casual. They're not looking at anything in particular because I think in the photo, Drew is paying more attention to the fact that he's getting his picture taken, and he's not really lost in the moment. And also, this doesn't really quite look like him, too. I got to step back and change a few things here. His eyes are pretty big. Let's move these back down. Maybe this will just be a warm-up drawing for an eye for the face. His eyes are a little bigger. Let's bring that up. We're using the lasso tool in Photoshop to edit some. Sometimes the process is good where you just get something on the page and then use tools to manipulate it. So the spark of chaos and creativity of just interpreting lines out of your mind can then get something at least started. All right, so let's give the eyes some direction. So I'm just going to erase the pupils and then move. Let's see if I can give it some target. Let's target over to the left because that's where the sandworm's going to be. And let's get the rest of the neck and face down here too to give it some context. Size. Someone's personality and portraiture, the likeness of somebody is very important in terms of expression. The likeness is important in terms of expression, and also the proportions of the likeness are key to the impression. So proportions are really important. So I have his cheek a little thin here, looking at the concept, looking at the photo reference. So I'm just going to extend the left side of his face out a little bit more. In the photo, Drew's got a little bit of a smile going on here. So we're just going to take in the chin a little bit and bring the cheek out. Dune. Highly recommend the audiobook. I think I saw it on a billboard in Philadelphia last weekend. I went to go see Annie Letterman. Hilarious. Hilarious lady. I love the era of comedy we live in, and love him or hate him, Joe Rogan has ushered this era in of the podcast, comics, supporting each other, rebuilding the comedy store, rebuilding tours, a more collaborative era in comedy than in the past. And it took years to get there. I think about if you use Rogan as an example, if you do anything long enough, eventually you're going to pick up a following. You're just going to get so good at that one thing. If you spend 10 years doing anything, you're going to get good enough at it that somebody is going to appreciate it. And then that somebody is going to bring along somebody else, is going to bring along somebody else, is going to bring along somebody else. Perseverance is the rare mark, I suppose, in today's society to stick with something even though you're not getting the right feedback from it. Because it's going to take you a long time to get very good at that thing, especially if you're like a diversified or Renaissance style person who has a variety of interests. I think Joe, for instance, he's a MMA fighter, he's a commentator, he's a stand-up comedian, and now he's a podcaster. And it's just, if you do any one of those things, it probably takes you 2.5 years to become an expert at it. Let me think about that. I think some math I did a long time ago says you get about 2,000 hours of work a year if you do 8-hour days, 5 days a week. It's 2,000 hours, give or take, with vacations and stuff. It takes about 10,000 hours to be an expert. So what's the math on that? 5 years? If you do one thing as a job for 5 years, you're going to become an expert at it, 10,000 hours. So if you have three things, you're going to divide those up. It's going to take you 15 years to become an expert at all three things. Isn't that interesting? So I think that's probably what it took Joe to get the podcast to become where he's the expert, where he is the visionary and he's driving all these things. But he has brought on, like on this train, on this giant running choo-choo train that is the Joe Rogan experience, he's brought along scientists and philosophers and veterans and athletes and now comedians and actors who are all getting a lot of love and exposure through this relatively new medium, which is the internet. Now, to all you youngers out there who think that you were born with the internet, it's been around the entire time. No, that's not true. The internet's been only here for a short amount of time. And podcasting and social media, as we know it, is still a new thing that our brains are adapting to. Okay, what else is going to make this more Drew-like? I think Drew's got these pretty remarkable eyebrows. They're very expressive. So we're going to hit those a little bit harder. And then I think the eye is going to be going down. Now Drew's got green eyes, but we're going to give him blue eyes eventually for the sake of this because it's going to be one of the Fremen, addicted to the spice melange of the planet Arrakis. You know, at some point they're going to be that blue planet Arrakis. We're going to have to take some of this, the softness out. We're going to make you tougher eventually, Mr. Drew, because you are going to be one of the survivors on this hostile planet. Like, he's looking kind of chipper right now at the prospect of a giant sandworm coming over the horizon. "15 minutes in." So now, why is Drew in here? He's playing Gurney Halleck, who in the story was separated from Paul and, oh, spoiler alert, the House Atreides when the Harkonnens attacked, along with the Emperor's Sardaukar elite guard. And he was separated and had to go into hiding, ended up joining a smuggler ring to stay out of the way. He thought his Duke Leto was killed, and he assumed as well young Paul and his mother Jessica had also perished in the attack or were taken captive. So he joined the smugglers with his band of soldiers that he led out, men of the House Atreides guard, and lived as a smuggler, kind of a ruffian, for a few years until he gets reunited with Paul and his Fremen allies that he builds over several years. It's the prophecy of the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit are an organization of these mythical, super smart, selectively bred ladies who are trying to bring about the Messiah in a way. It's not really like a spiritual Messiah. It's more of a genetically selected superhuman over thousands of years, like, by breeding the smartest and best and brightest across the universe, across the galaxy. So he uses the myth that the Bene Gesserit started spreading among the locals, which are the Fremen, the indigenous people of the planet Arrakis, that there would be this Messiah prophet who would come and help turn Arrakis from a desert planet into an oasis. So he has a couple skills because he's Bene Gesserit trained by his mother. He's militarily trained by Gurney Halleck and Duncan Idaho. Duncan Idaho, I think, teaches him how to fly. It's hinted at in the story. Gurney is the poet, singer, warrior, philosopher type. So let's give him some armor. He's going to need a still suit because he's on the planet Arrakis. So we start with those iconic nose plugs, which gives some moisture, or like trap moisture as exhaled. It has a high collar of some kind. I don't know what the still suit in Dune looks like. Let's look up on Mr. Google. So this is kind of cool. Let's get some pictures. This is, oh, can I not open that? That's frustrating. So we have a picture here from Dune. There's Jessica on the left. I forget the name of Zendaya's character, but it's going to be the lady friend of Paul, and then Stilgar, the head leader guy of the Fremen. So these suits, they kind of look like motorcycle body armor or something like that, but they're designed to, I guess in the story at least, trap moisture on this desert planet and recirculate it and save it, along with some, I assume, temperature regulation. Real sci-fi looking place. It is interesting that, like, in today's society, we have a lot of footage of what it's like to fight in these austere environments because the United States and its allies, I mentioned England earlier, went into Iraq and Afghanistan and fought a war for 20 years. Now those wars are, well, I don't know if you'd say the war is winding down. I think those places are both still settling out in terms of who's in control. There is certainly a power vacuum in those areas, but the U.S. involvement is diminished. And we went from the 1990s being used to seeing little green men into the 2000s seeing men with coyote, brown, and flat dark earth and multicam. The camo changed. I would think that in a realistic Dune setting today, they would be wearing more camouflage colors, like black shows up very brightly or contrastingly in the desert. I guess unless it was in the shadows, then I think you'd want some kind of dark reddish type thing. So we're just gonna start sketching out some body armor. This guy's gonna be a warrior. Maybe some wrappings. He's gonna have water. Um, the still suit idea in the 80s, I think predates. I mean, the book was written in 65. It far predates the idea of a camelback, which we now is ubiquitous and everywhere. The idea of a plastic water bottle that can flex and fold and support weight. That's contoured to the body instead of just being a bottle. But that was an idea in Frank Herbert's Dune, I think long before it actually existed. They talk about plastics a lot in the book, and plastics are super common today, and it's been 60 years since, or almost 57, 56 years since that book. But plastics were very new in 65, and it was just plastics were just starting to come to use on weapons and equipment and electronics in the 60s. Still, everything was pretty much metal, like metal and wood, through the 40s and into the 50s. Stamped metal and things. So Frank Herbert, very forward thinking with a lot of reference to plastics and high tech stuff in the Dune universe, even though it was written in 65. So since it's going to be contemporary, I don't like the eyes looking down. I'm going to have them looking a little bit more off to the left and maybe up. Drew, this is not a great likeness of you, my friend, but your inspiration is carrying through my enthusiasm into the drawing. Now, there are not a lot of guns in this world, but there are a lot of swords. There's a lot of blades, so maybe I'll have him like holding some kind of blade here. Still like not thrilled about where the eyes are looking. I'm looking at the viewer. Maybe off to the right. And who's coming? Somebody's coming to watch the great sandworm arise from the desert. And there's like thumpers, which are these devices that the Fremen invented to call the sandworms, and it creates these ripples in the sand. Your ornithopters are these dragonfly winged helicopter-like machines in the Dune universe. And then there's like also landing ships that are pretty big, like these huge um, colony type ships. They're very geometric in the movie. And then there's even the bigger, the giant, massive guild spacing guild ferry ships. Something like that. That's a scale. It'd be more interesting if this was turned the other way. Let's try that. What's it like if it's this way? Nope. This way. That's kind of cool. I don't know, something like that. Well, Drew, I'm going to take your hair off and give you a helmet. Since that's how I would want to operate if I was for the planet Arrakis. I'd want some protection for the dome piece. There's a lot of dust blowing around. These winds are insane. You'd want some pretty sweet goggles, I think. Now, I know you're used to some wind, my man, because Drew is a sailboater, but not like Planet Arrakis, where it gets up to 600 miles an hour. These dust storms can take metal off an airplane. And since this is going to be set in kind of the world we exist in, like Dune is meant, unlike Star Trek. Let me rephrase that, because Star Trek's taking place in our world way in the future. And parallel universe movies are like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's a different parallel universe with us where superheroes exist among humans. And Star Wars happens a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Dune is humans 8,000 years in the future when, I don't know, space faring is common. Humans have colonized out into the galaxy. There's an imperial system. It falls back to like a feudal system of lordships and dukedoms, duchies, fiefdoms, and things like that. And the families control, have the power based on, I think it's typically like one family per planet. I would imagine Getty Prime, where the Harkonnens are from, probably has a few powerful families, but the Harkonnens are definitely the greatest, for instance. I think about a place like, England, ancient, or not, medieval England, where you had these different families vying for power across the sands of time. Right now it's the House Windsor, but there were these different houses during the founding, the Normans and the Saxons, and all these different groups who were organized for control. Some kind of scarf covering thing would be fun. Let's get the hand on the blade. Gurney Halleck is known to be a very skilled fighter. In order to escape the ambush of the Harkonnens, through his skill and ability, he survived. Infamous character in the Dune world universe, known across space as a brilliant fighter. I would say the Harkonnens are probably some kind of heavy infantry, as is the Atreides naturally, with a couple of recon units. But then you have the denizens of Arrakis, being the Fremen, are a superb light desert infantry who can move quickly, take advantage of the natural terrain. They are unshielded versus the more civilized peoples of the Dune world who carry shields on them. Well, we have a comment. We have a couple people who liked the video. Tim Lewis, John Mack, and Ryan Griffin. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for liking the vid. Hope you're enjoying it. Hope you're having a good Friday, the 3rd of December. I forgot to introduce the day. Got some headphones, put in some Peltors. Now he's got the goggles up top. In contemporary warfighters, they have the nods attached up top. But in this case, because of the sand blowing around, I imagine Mr. Gurney Halleck, aka Drew here, would have his night vision equipment stored in some kind of pouch, some kind of protected pouch on his still suit. Let's make his hand a little bigger down here. I expect some of you listening, maybe Mrs. Christina out there, will be on their way home from work. So I think we'll take a break from drawing and get into a Tom Reads the News segment at the 29-minute mark, which is right now. So let's pull up the Drudge Report, and I'm going to tell you what is not worth your time. These are the headlines and how sensational stuff usually is. So, what do we got here? I'm getting an ad for Athletic Greens. I probably should try that at some point, something Rogan does. Let's go through really quick. Big headline today is Biden coughs through speech. Are you okay? Who cares? He's fine. Uh, Job growth misses in November despite high hopes. I think the United States is sustaining itself. I think most countries around the world are finding ways to sustain themselves. They're just trying to get the disruption of the supply chain back online. I think in general people are sick of the lockdowns and they're not going to deal with it anymore. They're going to keep working even if it kills them. I think that's just the way it is. Americans are not good at being held down by governments. We've fought wars over this kind of stuff. It's also why we're not very good at like imposing our will on other nations. We know what it's like on the other side. We're a nation that had someone else's will imposed on us. We didn't like it. So we like fought it off. Now, the only exceptions to that are like World War II, Germany and Japan. You guys created such disruption that the US is like, hold on a minute. We got to keep an eye on you too. We're going to keep a permanent garrison here forever because we don't trust you. And also, we got to have available resources to go and fight Russia if Russia decides to spread Stalinist communism anywhere else. So beyond the point, any other time we just have a hard time uh, going all into a conflict because half the country is like diplomats and peace seekers, and half the country is descendants of the warrior rebellious culture. Like we're never going to be completely homogenous because we're a society of rebels, right? And some people rebel into a peaceful way, and some people rebel into a kind of conflict like way. And then I'm sure the grand middle are people who just want to go to work, have families, and stay out of any kind of conflict or fighting or whatnot. But with social media, we've just amplified voices on both sides. That's quite a tangent. Record high number of COVID cases in New Hampshire. Okay. Omicron spreading twice as fast as Delta hits Los Angeles. Unprecedented surge of children under 5. I had a conversation with my brother, who is an economist, over the Thanksgiving break. And it was so good. We like to bounce different ideas off of each other. And he's been talking about for years, what is the price of a life? What are the people of a nation state willing to give up to keep somebody alive? And I think that equation takes in a lot of variables. And one of those variables has to be age. How long have you been on this planet? How long do we want to keep you on this planet? Because we're kind of approaching, if we're not already at a smart point, where life is sustainable, like on machines. And it's very, very expensive to do this. Do we task a young nurse and doctor with keeping alive a geriatric 105-year-old? That's taking away time and resources from keeping a 5-month-old premature or like premature baby alive. There's only so many healthcare workers. There's only so many machines. There's only so much medicine. Where do we allocate these resources? So in terms of manpower cost, where do you want to put the people to care for the future or the past? This was a debate I got into with my ex 4 years ago. Is like, when do we cut it off? What do we keep alive? Like, let's say the Titanic is sinking, and Albert Einstein is like 30 years old on the Titanic. Women and children first, but like, do you try to say, do you make an exception for Albert Einstein? Who stays in the Titanic? Which child and woman stays in the Titanic in order to get Albert Einstein off? The and then financially, what's the alternate? I said, Rick was asking what's the value of a life, and I just pulled a number out of my butt and said I think 10 million bucks is what the United States State Department would pay for every hostage taken in, let's say, the Gulf of Oman. I don't know. If a Somali pirate captures an American dock worker or longshoreman who's working on a ship or captain, I would say 10 million per person. It's probably cheaper to pay $10 million than to send DevGru or SEAL Team 6 out to go get them. I mean, we did that, but it's very expensive to send operators all over the world. We don't have that many operators. Well, maybe we do. I don't know. Who know? I don't know how many operators are out there. I have a general idea based on Wikipedia. So with COVID, I think the numbers are we've lost, I don't know, let's say it's 1 million Americans, but there's 360 million Americans. So what's the percentage of that? 1 in 360? Is that like 0.36% have died? And most of them are in the upper spectrum. This is not compared to Spanish flu. Spanish flu attacked young people and threatened young people's age. So in terms of like there's lives lost and then there's man months lost or like time lost. If you take the older someone is, the less human potential you lose if they die from a pandemic disease. I sound heartless, I know, but I'm just trying to raise like the question in your minds like how much are you willing to tolerate versus getting the economy back on track? Like how much time of the young people are you willing to sacrifice to keep the old around? I don't know, man. I mean, as a relatively young person, 38 years old, even though I have the beard going on here, I don't care if I get sick and die as a society. I really don't. I care if it starts killing people in mass under age 25. If it starts killing people under age 25 of child rearing age, then that's an existential crisis for humanity. This is not an existential crisis for humanity, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't even compare against previous pandemics. However, it is preparing us for the big one. Whatever is coming down the pipe, we're going to be more prepared for that one. All right, let's go. Omicron. Oh, but that being said, I did sign up for my booster shot next Monday. So I've gotten 2 vaccines from Moderna, and I'm going to get a third one. Whatever. Lockdown, jabs, Germany. Germany shutting down. Thousands of sailors, Marines unvaxxed after deadline. I don't know. I don't want to wade into like the politics of like, do you get vaxxed or not? There's the myocarditis stuff. I did paperwork today for the Monday morning jab, and there's warnings like, do you accept the risk of getting myocarditis, which is swelling of your heart muscles? I do. I don't. You know what? I don't think my life is as worth. I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more humble in terms of like what is the value of my life versus what's the value of the potential of the future or somebody else. Let's say the Albert Einstein to yet be born or something like that. I really don't know, man. Let's go through some more headlines. Alec Baldwin cries. That's really unfortunate. My comment on the shooting on set is it was 100% preventable. I think Alec Baldwin needs to bear a majority of the responsibility, as every actor should. I have trained in firearms for 8 years. I've done several classes with different instructors, from Green Berets to local law enforcement to just friends and wizards on the range. My Uncle Bob, who got me into shooting when I was 13, was a marksman in the Army. And if you take any class from anybody, anywhere, anytime, they say safety, 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 safety. Rule number one is don't point the gun at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Be aware of your target and what's behind it. And then I always get confused because I rattle those things off so fast. Always treat every gun like it's loaded. Always treat every gun like it's loaded. So, he points a gun and pulls the trigger. I mean, the Colt single action army doesn't go off unless you pull the trigger, get the hammer going on that thing. You have to have the hammer back. Like if the hammer was already back and it's a hair trigger, yeah, those triggers can be incredibly light if you have the hammer back already. If the hammer's forward, that thing's not going off. So it was cocked, and then maybe he brushed the trigger. How was the round in there? I don't know. It's going to come out in the court. It's just really unfortunate that young director didn't have to die. Did the gun need to be pointed at a camera or at a person? I don't know. I think Baldwin should have had way more firearms training before doing class like that. Hey, Amber, thanks for tuning in. Gave you a shout out earlier. Uh, I am happy that you are one of those people who still exists in the world and hasn't died of COVID. Thank you for awesome contributions of music and positivity. Even though the music was kind of dark and grungy, but it made me feel better about myself. Why is that? Why does like emo music make you feel better? It's music about sad stuff, but somehow it's like relatable. My sister Rhonda watches Real Housewives, and I can't stand it. I'm like, why are you watching these idiots who are doing nothing with their lives? And she's like, it makes me feel better about myself. All right, fair enough. I watch some weird stuff too, man. By the way, really awesome show I just got into. Thank you, Steve Eggery, for turning me onto this. Is some hard sci-fi from Amazon called The Expanse. That show is shockingly well written. I don't know about the characters. I love that Amos guy. Some of the main actors are a little dry. I would say like I like half the actors on the show, but I like the story a lot. A lot. And I worked on a game called off-world trading company with Mohawk Games, which I still love, even though I have problems with Soren and Layla. That's a whole nother story. But that game that they made that I was kind of involved with was great. I love that narrative of the belt interacting with Mars, interacting with Earth, the moon, like transporting resources and people across the solar system in the relatively near future, next 100 years. Let's go through the rest of the articles. Meet America's most advanced humanoid. Look, the Terminator apocalypse will not happen. 5.56 by 45 out of any AR from 10 inches to 20 inches goes through thin metal, pretty easily. Like the actual T-800 model from the movie Terminator from James Cameron, I could take out an army of those things, like, and it wouldn't take over Pennsylvania. Like, it's thin metal is pretty easy to perforate and destroy, and like, dude, you can't let a robot go in the woods for less than 5 minutes and it doesn't get rusted and broken down, man. I'm starting to work with some DoD stuff. That's all I can say about that. The Dawn faces flurry of investigations beyond January 6th. I'm actually kind of surprised that he didn't get arrested or penalized or something. But then you realize, dude, the guy's the president he's the former president. He's got all the secrets. You can't imprison somebody who knows all the secrets. You gotta make it easy on him. You give him some kind of retirement, and you say, look, man, you can't have the life you had before. You're starting too much shit. You're starting too much crazy shit. But we can't let you get so upset at the system that you go telling China and Russia where all the nukes are. So I don't know what you do, man. This is kind of new, uncharted territory. I don't know if we've had a former president. I have to go back into my presidential history. That's something I'm pretty weak on, ladies and gentlemen. I'm more interested in like war history, but actual presidential history in terms of like which presidents were more traitorous to the United States of America. Some of my Republican friends are going to be really mad at me for criticizing the Don, but I kind of feel like it's hard to argue that he wasn't at least involved in the January 6th smash and grab of the Capitol. So I don't know, man. I don't think if he runs, I think it's going to be a massive blowout. I think the entire middle of the country is not going to touch him on the ballot. There's always going to be the holdouts who are the diehards. It might be 10% of the electorate. So I mean, if he runs again, that the Republicans are just giving the White House to the Dems. That's what my impression is. So in terms of like investigations and what I mean, the guy he's now at a level of the system where he was able to pardon people. He is now above the law in several ways. If you're laughing at what I'm saying, there is something called diplomatic immunity, and the UN authorizes it. If you're an ambassador and you go to another country and you work, you are now under the protection of that country. And it's because the relationship between the countries is more important than the lives of any individual that is affected within those countries. Because we're talking about war. We're talking about total war. We're talking about like deaths of tens of thousands, of not hundreds of thousands of people are on the line in these nation-state conflicts since World War I. So individuals, when you're talking about the game of nations, the game of the world, individuals don't really matter. And that's for good and for bad. That's how I feel about it. Feds could soon release alternative Mueller report. Fine. White House doctor facing fresh scrutiny over twisted COVID timeline. Look, man, if you don't think it came out of a lab by this point, I think you might be too optimistic or pessimistic about the world. I think there's plenty of evidence from people in the 2016 who were saying that they're doing gain of function research on bats and mice and stuff out in Wuhan. I mean, there was some kind of lab involvement. Let's say if you don't think COVID actually came from a lab, but COVID was born naturally. Let's say that actually happened. Now we're aware of what is being made in the lab. There's other stuff being made in labs, and some of these labs aren't run very well. So hopefully, like this COVID scare makes lab security better. That's what I hope for. Skydive at 300. These athletes racing to Earth. So Doug Drudge report. This is like there's the headline that's the most sensational. There's things you probably should worry about. Then there's like your politics, your like, I don't know, and then your like celebrity stuff on the right. Let's go through some of the celebrity stuff on the right. Baldwin, we talked about. Record low rate mental health as excellent. Record low, I don't know what that means. Mag, humans doomed to go extinct. No doubt, everything does. ISS swerves to dodge space junk again. The ISS is in its end of life cycle right now. And there is a ton of space junk out there. If you're not tracking already, the Russians launched some kind of anti satellite missile and it took out one of their missiles and it left a giant debris of space junk floating around the Earth. If you've ever seen the movie Gravity, it's kind of like that. And that's not the only weapon up there. There's missiles, there's lasers, there's something called like passive jammers and stuff. This is why we have Space Force. It's to guarantee the security of orbiting bodies and information satellites and stuff. A lot of these satellites we use to communicate or to navigate across the Earth. Let's see, and also the research and stuff, like the R&D done in space is like critical for our understanding of existence, right? Uh, Pegasus used to hack State Department phones. I don't know what that is. Tech moguls are looking for new playground, maybe a new place for tax revenue. What's that article for? Tech moguls looking for new playground. The Atlantic. I like the Atlantic. Jack Dorsey got bored of Twitter. He didn't get bored of Twitter. If you've been following Scott Galloway for the last 3 years, he's been saying Jack is the absent CEO. He spends 75% of his time working on Square, which is the big money maker, and then he spends like 25% of his time with Twitter. I don't think Twitter was supposed to be huge. I don't think he wrote Twitter thinking it was going to be the primary means to interact with celebrities and pundits, but here it is. And I think it's ruined communication. In 1941, Winston Churchill realized he couldn't write these long letters to all his friends and relations anymore because he just had too many letters to write to run a war. So he got brief. And after that, texting happened, like shorter conversations. And now we're absolutely at the bottom. We've deconstructed an abstracted conversation, and we're realizing there's no context. When you're limited to 120 words, what does it mean? What's the context? I can't tell if you're angry, sarcastic, or in any kind of mood. And I think the big problem with social media is nobody knows what the actual intent of the statement is. You can say a statement three different ways and it can mean three different things. We basically have a tonal language like China where you have like tone matters so much, and in Twitter you're not getting the tone. Okay, can we keep going? Tech moguls looking for new playground. Jack Dorsey's decision to leave Twitter. Mark Zuckerberg's pivot to the metaverse. Metaverse is dumb, but it might be on the way. I don't think the Zoomers are going to retreat into some VR world. The hypothesis I heard on why Zuckerberg bought Oculus was a giant inside trade that people who were invested in Facebook couldn't save to make money, and they thought, you know what, if we sold, it would be insider trading and the market would crash the Facebook stock. So, what's the alternative way to make some money around that? You invest in a company that Facebook then acquires and you get paid out. And that was the theory I heard from some guy at, oh, I love his commentary. Dude was the extra history dude. James Portnoy. That was his idea. And I kind of like it because there are people who love VR, but most people, 9 out of 10 people get sick in VR after 15 minutes, man. And of gamers, half of them wear glasses. It's not comfortable to wear VR with glasses. I don't think there was huge consumer demand for this VR experience. I think there was a few zealots who love the idea of this alternative universe because they don't know how to participate in the real world, and they pushed it. They pushed this thing really, really hard. But Scott Galloway, NYU, Stern School of Business, great educator, teacher, analytical mind, says the market isn't there for it, man. Now you could counter argue me and say, look, I mean, you can't buy a lot of these VR headsets; they're sold out. Correct. So are like Lamborghinis. So are Bugattis and stuff. So are like any super valuable high end luxury item is going to probably sell out because of its novelty. There's enough rich people to buy a thing. But is it like really mainstream or is it like being pushed? I see a lot of people's VR headsets just sitting in the box, man. I mean, I apologize to Brian Mahoney and some of my friends, guys I work with who are like big VR, AR advocates. The content is way too expensive to make. Joe says zealots is not a Friday word. I don't know. What would you call it? Joe, please, thanks for jumping in the Tomcast. What is the word? The enthusiasts for VR who are pushing the Mark Zuckerberg to make the metaverse. Why Facebook became the metaverse, I don't know, man. It's a scary term. It's apocalyptic, And I don't think people are gonna buy into it, man. I'm feeling the pull away from Facebook. I don't have it on my phone anymore. I use the Messenger, but I think the young people are gonna want real access to real events. I think travel's gonna go through the roof when this pandemic's over. Through the roof. I got stock in Boeing. I think it's a great time to buy stock in Boeing too. It's down right now. Right. So, I think Dorsey's probably a brilliant guy, and Twitter is just a sideshow to him. I think it's like a joke that went wild, and he just like, yeah, it's a viral idea. Speaking of viral, I'm listening to Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point from 2008, talking about virality. It's a pretty good thing. What else is going on? West Side Story, Spielberg, that's fun. Hollywood and music. Broadway is really good about making movies about or stories, plays about making plays. It's kind of like that's what they're best at. That's what they know the most. Joe says enthusiast is a better Friday word along with beer. Beer sounds great, Jojo. Beer sounds great. Any more Judge Report stuff? Let's just focus on the pictures. Plumber finds thousands of cash envelopes inside wall at Austin megachurch. Dude, these mega churches are whack. I'm glad people are happy and they go to church and they get some kind of community sense from it. I miss that. I grew up Catholic. I miss the sense of community. I miss the sense of like having friends and having conversations. I'm not all about priests touching kids. I'm not all about like invoking God and the divine to try to justify your new suit and your jet plane and your boat. I think there is an open market for some kind of global secular humanist hangout spot. Guess what that is? I think it's called going to a concert on the weekends. Love that. I go to the range. I go to the range Sunday mornings. I believe in ballistics, ladies and gentlemen. I believe in ballistics. I can see gravity pulling my 22 rimfire to Earth past 50 yards. Okay. When it comes to China, sports entertainment often tread lightly. Screw China. DeSantis proposed a civilian military force he would control. That's weird. I saw that headline. DeSantis is the Texas governor, right? The hell? I mean, I think he's talking about a state militia. The biggest story that's going on that no one's really talking about like enough is the Ghislaine Maxwell court thing. Maxwell lawyers grill witness who testified about underage girls. Defense team's confidence grows. Epstein visited Clinton White House 17 times. This guy was deep. I don't have any evidence or stories other than what I hear, and that is that he was like a Mossad agent or something. He was connected to this international intelligence gathering organization, but maybe he's just some like free willing radical agent who thought he could have a bunch of blackmail on all these powerful people and do whatever he wanted. Some people try to rule the world through money. Some people try to run it through force. This dude was our generation's Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. He had a bunch of brothels and he knew about the sex trade. Most people thankfully don't know about the sex trade and human trafficking. This is someone who knew a lot about it and found that it was a Achilles heel weak point for a lot of the rich and powerful around the world, but trapping and blackmailing them. So will Ghislaine go to jail? I assume she will. Will she suicide herself? I don't know. Okay, that's Tom reads the news. I think. I don't know. Hey, this is interesting. Mark Cuban buys a small Texas town. I wondered like 4 years ago if the Silicon Valley wealthy and the elites of the United States were smart, they would start buying up property in Middle America and moving their countries there, like recolonizing the Rust Belt, but with hipsters and like tech giants and stuff. Pittsburgh, Detroit, all the real Baltimore, the real estate's relatively cheap compared to Silicon Valley and stuff, and you could just pay a lot of incentives to get, I don't know, left leaning liberal type people to move there if you really wanted to. Like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg have the power to change politics if they want to by just incentivizing moving it there. Direct payouts, I think, are illegal, but I don't think there's anything. I mean, the Rajneeshis got in trouble for human trafficking people out to Oregon. Will Jeff Bezos get in trouble if he human trafficked Silicon Valley Democrats to Kansas City? I don't know. Something I think about. That's all Tom reads the news because I'm tired of being fired up. Let's go back to drawing. Let's go back to drawing, ladies and gentlemen. And let's just throw some colors on here for fun. Why not? Let's come underneath layer. Let's get the blue Fremenize going on. We'll wrap this puppy up. What do we got going on? We got 54 minutes. Let's do 6 minutes of color. 6 minutes of color. Make him a little green. Just a little hair green. Something like that. And then we got to have some desert tan kind of colors. I think a red armor would be pretty sweet. A reddish sand armor would be pretty cool. It's kind of spice melange camo. Still suit. Maybe it's like a dark blue or something. That'd be kind of cool. Underneath. I like the idea that the still suit is like this dark colored thing, kind of like a polar bear skin, but underneath these layers of camouflage and materials. Someone's honking outside and they could really stop. I would appreciate it. Color time on a Friday. Happy birthday, Drew. Hope you're having a good time. Hope you get some good beer, some Guinness. Get you some Guinness. It's that dark beer weather out there, ladies and gentlemen. I believe, Gunpowder Falls, I think has their Schwartz beer out. Jojo, might go get a Schwartz beer tonight. May the Schwartz be with you. To mix our like sci-fi universes, let's work in a little bit of Spaceballs. The planet Dune, Arrakis, the land of the spice melange. Notes from Muad'Dib and his travels by the Princess Irulan. The book was dope. I don't care what you think. I loved it. Thanks, Steve Agri, for getting me turned on to the Dune book. And every other sci-fi nerd who's like, dude, that Star Wars is all right, man, but you really got to get into Dune, bro. You're not a real sci-fi nerd unless you get into that, Heinlein and some of that Frank Herbert. Start getting the fan fictions of Star Trek. Not a real fan. Dude, who became so possessive? Like, why do fans get so possessive over their stuff? Chill out. Get the prototype Oakley specs up here. What would happen if you lived in a red place and you wore red lenses? What does that do? Does it make everything grayscale? Does it increase contrast? What is that? Kind of like this red armor idea. I remember when I was playing with Legos when I was a kid, there were these like Mars Lego dudes, and I think they wore red. What was that? What was that called? There was like the green Space Police dudes. I like those a whole lot. Space Police were dope. What? I'm gonna kind of give it a Martian landscape, a little bit redder, brown in the bottom. Sandworm's gonna be blackish. I think there's a connection between the still suits being a dark color and the worms being a dark color. That's what I'm feeling at least. And then the skies, like the Martian skies, are like this pale pink, and I kind of think Arrakis would be kind of a palish pink too, but maybe it's blue. I mean, there's not much moisture in the air, so it maybe just like a hint of blue, maybe just like a tiny, tiny bit. So it'd probably be like pretty gray because it wouldn't just be sand, but there'd be a lot of maybe the clouds would be like sandy. There wouldn't be many clouds because there's not enough moisture. It'd be the sky would probably be pretty dark too, wouldn't it? No, there's plenty of air though. I don't know. I guess it's just white. Post comments if you have feelings about what color the sky is on Dune. Purple. Joe says she likes what's going on in the sky. Thanks, Joe. There's like the moons, there's the two moons, and then there's The drop ships. There's the Space Guild, Spacing Guild drop ships. I don't know what to kind of do with this. There's a lot going on. Sometimes I go with the soft round brush because it's vague. I like to be a little vague sometimes. Let the people do their own thinking. Oh, I'm painting on the drawing layer. Whoops. Somehow I switched layers. That's okay. Just going to paint over everything on anyway. In drawing portraits, you could spend hours just noodling and working and noodling and working. So we're just going to get a little color on here now, but not spend too much time. Mandrew's got some freckles. Should have made my color a little bigger, color palette just a little bit bigger. A little deeper red around the eyes. His eye. Bring it up. It's a little bit paler around the forehead and the eyebrows, probably because he wears sunglasses a lot. And it's going to be tanner up on the forehead, darker. Realizing the mustache really comes right out of the nose. Let's get some darker, kind of freckly spots. It's got that Irish freckle. A little bit of blonde and like some little bit of reddish. Boys O'Hara got a little bit of that reddish blonde to him. Shout out to the Art of Craftsmanship. Dustin, Drew, Devin, and Derek, the brothers O'Hara, all involved in their own little way, but mostly Dustin does the work. And Drew films it. Not Drew. Devin films it. Sorry, boys. Getting y'all confused. I can picture you in your minds. I just can't get the names right. I got your faces, though. If you could have read my mind, you would know who I was talking about. It's the connection between my brain and the mouth words part is just not 100%. Joe says she has doc opinions on one side of me and drawing info on the other. Cool. Got so many opinions on a Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe has had too much coffee today. That is the news from Wisconsin. It's a tough time when you have too much stimulants. It's a tough time. Just want to talk to all the people all at once, right, Joe? Thanks for hanging out on a Friday. Eat some red for the lips. Joe's like, it wore down. Okay, good. Glad you're coming down from that. There we go. I'm starting to feel it now. Colors ain't right, but we're getting some shape. Getting some shape. Maybe get some kind of strap hanging down over here. Be cool. I love the characters still are from Dune. I love the voice actor that they got for the audiobook is pretty stellar too. Stilgar of the Fremen. His big booming voice. I don't know where the light source exactly is here, so it's just kind of vague. I haven't thought about where I want the light coming from yet, but the nose definitely needs to be brighter and a little redder. Something like that for now. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Just got to put something up there. And then we got to color in the people. And I painted over the people like an idiot. So we're just going to kind of hit their highlights. It's kind of, it does feel sandy all of a sudden, which is kind of cool. Beefcake dude over here. Some big old boots. I think the deal is that these worms are actually the spice factories. They make the spice. I think that's the deal. That's the big secret. So the Harkonnens couldn't eliminate the worms, and also the Fremen kind of control them. At least they're able to navigate on them. The Fremen make their blades out of the teeth. Something like that. Face kind of looks like that pit that Luke Skywalker falls into in the Star Wars world. Just to kind of get it going. This is the moon. The ships are visible in this sci-fi universe, and I think that's kind of a cool idea. Like if you look up at the moon, and the moon is a very visible object to the human eye. It's about the size of your thumb at arm's length away in outer space. Um, if you took something like you could see an airplane flying, airplanes at like 5 miles. So how big would a ship need to be in orbit for us to see it from the ground? It's kind of a fun thing to think about. The Star Wars universe, some of the movies have given us an impression of that you could see a Star Destroyer from the ground. I think a Star Destroyer is about a kilometer long in that fiction. So I love that. I love thinking about what that would look like. I have seen the International Space Station fly over at night, but it's just a point of light. And the space station's about the football field. So imagine like 110 meters by like 50 meters, or a little, maybe it might be like a square, like 100 by 100 generally. It's basically a football field in space, and that can catch enough light that we would see it. That's at like 250 miles, give or take 10 miles. I don't know, between 200 and 250 miles above the surface. So I would think if you have something 10 times that size, so 1,000 meters across, maybe you would see some kind of resolution. It'd be small, but I think you could make out a shape of a Star Destroyer. It'd be a tiny triangle, and underneath some kind of binocular, maybe even like 4 times binoculars, you probably could make out the shape of it. So for a ship to be coming in from orbit, it would have to be pretty darn big to see it, at least a kilometer in size. So this, the Gilding ship, I mean the Space Guild ship that is visible in the movie Dune, is huge. I mean, they're probably 10 kilometers long, and it's pretty visible from the ground in the movie. The moon is about 3,000 miles across in diameter, and it's 250,000 miles away, give or take. Over the last couple years, you've been able to see Jupiter and Saturn in the night sky from Pennsylvania. And that's been kind of fun. And if you have a telescope or a spotting scope with at least 20 power, you can see the rings of Saturn, even though it's very small. But you can see that sucker, and that is very far away. I want to say 70 million miles away. That number is coming out of my behind. And Jupiter is half as far. So if like Jupiter's 32 million, then Saturn's like 64 million, something like that. You can see Jupiter, and you can see 4 points of light being some of the moons. Moons of Jupiter. So would we actually see the shadow side in space? Actually, no. We wouldn't see a shadow like that on the moon. We would see the shadow of the dropships in atmosphere. But the moon's shadow would probably just blend in with whatever color the sky was. So either the sky is like all this purpley gray color. In fact, the moon like would have some earth shine to it. Or I should say Arrakis shine to it. It'd be kind of cool if it like glowed like kind of pinkish. That'd be cool. If the moon like just caught a little bit of bounce light in like a pink spectrum, that'd be cool. The sun side would just be white. These moons. Maybe just a little bit of pink. Might be kind of neat. Joe says, I don't want spice from those things. I would try it. I would try it once. Apparently, long-term exposure gives you like the sight into the future. It's kind of cool. The podcast would go from Tom reads the news to Tom predicts the future using the spice melange. And that might be kind of fun. I'm sure somebody does that. And that spice would probably be ayahuasca. What I've heard. Never tried it. Only heard about other people's experiences. Purple for the shadows. Let's go multiply 30%. A little more bluish. Little bluish. Joe says long-term exposure gives you the sight, and 6 months later, cancer. Very muddy-looking Drew O'Hara as Gurney Halleck in Dune. How'd you get so dirty, Drew? Been hanging out with some sandworms? Hope Drew is having a fantastic birthday today. If I was him, I would want to hang out at the Guinness Brewery. Open gate. Outside of Baltimore. Baltimore, where the crack is used. Oh, he's holding a knife. I keep forgetting I need to decorate this. It'd be kind of cool if he had an art of craftsmanship blade on the planet Arrakis. kind of jade color. I haven't really thought about what his armor is or what it's doing. Just kind of shoulder strap here. His neck scarf will probably have some kind of pattern on it. A keffiyeh or a shamag. What are we at? 114. We'll wrap it up soon because I'm getting tired of talking. And this is the point of a drawing where I want to just zone into it, get into the details, and listen to some tunes like what Amber gave me earlier. We'll say it one more time. The band Actors, Face Meets Glass is the tune of the day. Pretty dope. Jeff Warwicks likes the stream. Thank you, Jeff. Amber liked the stream, and 3 other people. Draw in today. Having a good old time, sharing the love with my friends on the internets who are helping keep each other sane in these wild Omicron times. Do you feel me? Do you think? Got to do something. I think I'm going to go to Gunpowder Falls, though. I'm going to go get me a Schwarzbier and maybe a brat. Some brat and some fries. At the elliptical. Ooh, I was going to play games with Steve. That's at 5:30, I think. Oh, Joe says Doc knows how to say her name now. That's cool. Awesome. What is the to-date expense on the Doc cast? $100? 200? I played Don't Starve with my buddies Josh and Luke last night, and I remembered why I don't play games anymore. I got so much anxiety from trying to stay alive in this game, and nothing was intuitive. Nothing was intuitive. I know people love that game. They love Klee. I played Oxygen Not Included. It was adorable. But I'm kind of over learning things that don't relate to the real world. They don't have some kind of intuitive... if I haven't already been introduced and established to the thing. Phone's calling. I got to go take that. Probably a good time to rush. I don't even know who that is. It's probably spam. But I'm tired anyway. I'm just getting tired of learning new things. We're gonna keep learning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just saying I'm tired. I need a break from learning stuff every once in a while, and that's what this weekend's gonna be. I'm just gonna be drawing, doing what I know, listening to some tunes. Probably no podcast for me, even though I got like 20 hours of podcasts I want to listen to. Press Check Consulting. I got the Joe Rogan Experience is always introducing me to new things. Oh yeah, I'm gonna share that the Eye of the Desert. Just I think that would be a good thing to end the broadcast on. I think it's called the Eye of the Sahara. It's a feature seen from space of a 30-mile across circular structure. And there was a guest on the Rogan Experience this week who talked about the theory that this might have been Atlantis, that the sea might have gone through this area and flooded this in such a way that it made a hospitable civilization hub. And not that the people built the structure, but that it was a collapsed dome of some kind, some rock dome or volcanic thing that collapsed. But there was water that had eroded into here and created like thousands, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. There was grass and life and animals and trade and all kinds of things in the current nation of Mauritania. So I love Google Earth. Let's do a quick zoom in to where that is, because that's fun. Let's turn traffic off. Let's go to Mauritania. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ladies and gentlemen, Africa, I present to you. And Mauritania is here. And from space, look how high up you can see this thing. It's huge. We are probably at like, I'm guessing if this is 1,000 miles across, we're at least 1,000 miles up at this altitude. So this is 4 times higher than the space station. And you can see this thing. It's huge. So the guy on Rogan was talking about how these are not just patterns of wind, but patterns of water. That at some point this was all under the sea and done. I don't know. I mean, wind. This seems like a prevailing wind thing too, but I'm no geologist. I'm no weather expert. But I just think this thing is pretty darn cool. Pretty darn cool looking, eh? We get in 3D view. We can zoom in. Google Earth has some amazing photography capability. Love Google Earth. My favorite things. The Ricat structure. Atlantean structure. Fun. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this was Drawing with Tom, and Tom reads the news. I hope you enjoyed it. Probably find this on YouTube later. If this is on YouTube and you're commenting, thanks for commenting. I appreciate it. Thanks for liking, subscribing, whatever. This is for fun, and this is just to build a network and give back by sharing my process with all you wonderful humans and non-humans out in the universe whenever this is watched. Might be watched 10,000 years from now. Might be watched on the planet Arrakis 8,000 years from now. And if young Paul Atreides watches this, I honor you, sir. Have a great weekend, my friends. Take care.